Hey guys, before I get started on this next episode, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone out there supporting me and listening to the episodes here at the Good Evening Kitties podcast. I've gotten 2 great reviews on iTunes, and so I want to give a thanks to Roadblock187 and Pismo Steve for those great reviews. I really appreciate it, and it was awesome to get them. So if anyone else wants to write a review, like I said, you can find me at iTunes, Podbean, Podbay, and now I'm on Google Play. Again, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this next episode. Hey everybody! Welcome to the Good Evening Kitties podcast, a Tales from the Crypt review. My name is Melissa, your ghostess with the mostest. Today's episode is Season 2, Episode 7, The Sacrifice. So let's see here. Read here from the disc collection I have for Season 2. The description for The Sacrifice is, "It's the perfect plan, but for whom? A hotshot insurance exec plans to murder his lover's tycoon hubby." Let's see. The Sacrifice stars Kevin Kilner, who was in many things, including Home Alone 3. Kim Delaney is in this. She was in TV's NYPD Blue and TV's Army Wives, among many other things. And Michael Ironside, who's great. He was in Total Recall, Starship Troopers, and many other things. This episode, the screenplay was written by Ross Thomas, and this was directed by Richard Greenberg. He also directed Little Monsters. If any of you have seen that movie, it's a pretty good one. So that's pretty much the intro here. So we'll get into Season 2, Episode 7, The Sacrifice. So this one starts out, the Crypt Keeper is cooking, and he's got a little chef hat on, and a little apron with a dude's face on it, and he's putting in a bunch of things, and he says he needs the blood of a sacrificed goat. And this one kind of stood out to me because he's like, I need the blood of a sacrificed goat. And he looks over onto the ground, and there's a goat, right? And he's looking at the goat, and he goes, "It's got to be a virgin goat." And then he looks at the goat, and he goes, "Guess you're off the hook, Nellie." And I'm like, is the goat not a virgin? Like, how does he know that the goat's not a virgin? I was like, okay. So this goat, whose name is Nellie, who's eating a little it's like a ceramic pot of grass. Apparently the Crypt Keeper knows he's not a virgin, so I was like, alright, I'm just gonna let that one go. But so he's just hanging out with the goat that he wanted to use the blood for, but he can't. So anyway, so he's just like, oh well. So he brings up the book instead, and he starts talking about a different kind of sacrifice. He says, a sacrifice made for love. So then it goes into the episode, and it starts out, we're back in LA. I think we've been in LA a couple times. We've been definitely to Venice Beach in one of them. So we're back to LA, and Kevin Kilner plays an insurance salesman, and he is driving over to a new client's penthouse apartment. His name is Mr. James Reed, and he's going over to Mr. Fielding's penthouse to speak with him about making a possible insurance deal. So he's heading over. It's a pretty ritzy, nice place. So he's getting into the elevator to head up to the penthouse because that's on the top floor, and a woman gets in who she's attractive. It's played by Kim Delaney, and he's instantly kind of like into her and checking her out and everything. And she's young, and I don't know what she does, but she looks like, in the rest of the episode, she's always like in a business outfit. So she does business, I guess. So he was like, "Oh, hi, I see you hit the penthouse floor." He's like, "Is your neighbor Mr. Fielding?" And she's just kind of like, she doesn't say much of it. So he's automatically assuming that it's her neighbor, because he's like, "You punched penthouse 2 and I punched penthouse 1. So he's like, if you must be the neighbor of Mr. Sebastian Fielding. And she's just like, "I guess you're a salesman?"
I suppose you're a salesman.
Yes, ma'am. That's how I make my living. Selling things. I can sell damn near anything to damn near anyone.
Yeah, so he's kind of like sweet talking her a little bit. And she just kind of walks off and doesn't say anything. She's like, whatever. And so he's in the penthouse of Mr. Fielding. And right away when he walks in, I noticed that it looks a lot like the condo or the penthouse, similar to the Switch episode. That was Season 2, Episode 2. At the end, when he goes to meet the woman that he was trying to change his body for in that episode. I think this is the exact same condo, or at least the entrance looks really familiar. And then the fact that they're also in LA and they showed the beach and everything, I was like, I think this is a similar kind of situation that they filmed it in. So yeah, it definitely looks like the same condo, that you just get a different view from a different angle in it. Instead of being shot from coming from the door, you're shot from coming from the balcony window. So he goes in there to talk to Mr. Fielding, and this guy is pretty down to earth. He's an older man, a little stocky. He has a bunch of money and a place that he's not really super into, but he loves the view of LA and when the lights come on at night. And he talks about a lot of crazy stuff.
Now, what do you see?
L.A.
No, sir. What you're looking at is the money, pussy, and bullshit capital of the Western world.
But he's real down to earth. He just got a pair of jeans and a Nike sweatshirt on and hanging out. Mr. Fielding is like, don't you want to know how I found out about you? And Mr. Reed's like, yeah, kind of. And so he got a notice from Mr. Reed's boss, Mr. Jasper. Kind of gave him like a hey, you should check out, whatever. I think it was his old boss or something. Or no, maybe it's his only boss. But yeah, so they get to talking about that, and as they're talking and all that stuff, Mr. Fielding also walks over to this like tropical closet. It's like set up like a little rainforest, and it's got a bunch of exotic macaws in it. And what's funny is these macaws have picked up a lot of the same words that he likes to use. Just random closet of like 4 or 5 huge macaws. And so basically, yeah, Mr. Jasper, his name is Jerry Jasper. He's the president of their company. And Mr. Fielding and Mr. Jasper served on a couple boards together. And so he was going to change insurance companies. What Mr. Fielding's wanting to do is make some sort of deal with Mr. Reed to where he's getting like a 30% commission on some sort of sale. I don't know if it's like, if he's selling to different people in his company, he gets a 30% commission. I'm not exactly sure how the deal's going to go. Mr. Reed's not super excited about it. He's like, wait, I don't need this. Mr. Fielding's like, I'll just go to someone else if this is what, I'll swindle it from someone else if that's fine. But then eventually he settles on getting 30% off of Mr. Reed's insurance sales, I guess is how it goes. I don't know if Mr. Fielding has like a business, and if his company people buy it, he gets a cut off of it. I don't know. It's something like that. Anyway, he's going to make a hefty chunk of money, not really doing anything, but giving Mr. Reed some leads and getting him money as well. So Mr. Reed ends up taking it. So just as they're about to like settle that deal and kind of talk about getting possible things going, the woman from the elevator walks in, and you find out, she comes in and she's talking to Mr. Fielding. And at first I was like, it's been a little bit since I've seen this episode. I do remember this one when I was watching it. I was like, okay, I remember how this one goes out. But you kind of think, because she's a lot younger, you think, at first I was like, oh, maybe it's his daughter. And she's talking about how she hates Jerry Jasper and everything like that. But she comes over, and apparently she's married to Mr. Fielding. So she is Mrs. Fielding. Her name is Gloria. And so I think Mr. Reed feels a little silly about how he acted in the elevator. So they exchange pleasantries and don't really say anything about having already met in the elevator. But you could tell that they're kind of eyeing each other up. She seems a little interested in him, and he seems a little interested in her. And so they get to talking, and they find out that Mr. Reed, the insurance salesman, lives on a boat, and his boat's called the Why Not.
And I live on a boat.
Really? What's her name?
The Why Not.
The Why Not? That's a wonderful name. Don't you think that's wonderful, darling?
Oh, yeah. I thought it was real cute the first time I heard it, 200 or 300 boats ago.
And he says he's not married and things like that. So they kind of make the deal for the insurance and kind of moves on from there. So it cuts to like, I guess the next morning. And he's in his boat, Mr. Reed. And Gloria, Mr. Fielding's wife, I don't know why I want to say Fielding. It's Mr. Fielding's wife, shows up. She's kind of like checking out the boat. And he's like, oh, hey. And she's like, hi. And he kind of was like, I think he could tell she was a little bit into him. And not super surprised that she was there. I think from what he was saying, that many other women have kind of done the same thing. Come to find out a little bit about the beneficiary part to the insurance policy, because Mr. Fielding was trying to take out an insurance, like a $10 million insurance policy. So they kind of, get to talking. Well, they don't do much talking, but they kind of, you could tell they kind of had a thing. And so she comes into the boat, and then they kind of, they do the sex. And then, well, it's kind of gross too, because there's this part where he like licks up her back, and I was just like, oh, it just wasn't, I was like, oh, gross, okay. So it was like, it just wasn't shot good. I don't know. It's just random for what the scene was. So he starts asking her, like, your husband is super healthy and he's projected to live to like 104 unless he were to have some sort of accident. So what he's basically saying is, if you really wanted to cash in on this insurance money, something would need to happen to him. And she's like, what are you talking about? And she's kind of like, I can't believe you would even ask me that and stuff like that. But then she easily kind of comes over onto his side, and they kind of, off the camera, they've talked about an insurance scheme to pull on Mr. Fielding. So they kind of have an affair, and then they decide what they're going to do, or at least get on some of his money, since she's married to him. And if something were to happen, she would get all the other stuff, and then they could go off and be together. Because basically what Mr. Reed is saying is he has no ties to anything. So if they wanted to like get on his boat and just go, he can do that. He's a salesman. He can get gigs other places and make money. So he shows up like a couple nights later, and he's got like a envelope full of money, lots of money. I mean, there's probably like $5,000 in there or something. And he gives it to Mr. Fielding, who is also still dressed up just casually. And she's still in her little like red business suit. I don't know what she does, but maybe she manages his accounts. I don't know. And they're all hanging out and they're celebrating like the deal, and Mr. Reed's laying out the papers to sign it, and they're like, well, Mr. Fielding's like, Gloria said we should have some champagne out on the balcony and watch the lights come on in LA, and he keeps talking about the view and how great it is, and Gloria goes out on the balcony and she pours the champagne. Mr. Fielding is looking over the side of the balcony. Mr. Reed, or James, comes over, grabs him from behind, and flips him over the side of the balcony, which this part's a little sad because he doesn't quite fall all the way. Mr. Fielding kind of grabs onto the rail, and he right away, as he cries out for Gloria to save him, and she just sits there, and I'm like, oh, that's sad. Like, he right away was just like, what's happening? He couldn't possibly think that she was behind it, and so he immediately wanted her help, but she was just like, meh. So then he pries his hands off the rail, and Mr. Fielding falls to his death. So then the cops show up because Gloria calls them, and she's like, well, I guess I better act like I'm hysterical, or whatever. And when I was thinking about, I've seen this episode, part of me was like, I felt like the Macaws were more in play with this, but they're not. Because at first I was like, oh yeah, I think, because the Macaws, they pick up on a lot of stuff, and they picked up what Mr. Fielding was saying, and I was like, I think maybe they give them away, but that's not exactly how it plays out. I mean, the Macaws are still around, but they're mostly there for just like a comic relief kind of thing. I thought maybe they would have more to do with it. So the cops show up, and she kind of explains what happened, and they're consoling her, and Mr. Reed is hiding like in a closet or in the other room, so they don't know he's there. And so the cops explain to Gloria, like, did you know he was getting ready to take out a $10 million insurance policy on himself, but he didn't sign the papers yet. So then part of me was like, oh crap, they probably should have got him to sign the papers before they push him on the thing, but I think that's part of their plan. Because then, like, if it didn't sign them yet, I mean, technically she's not getting the money, but I don't know. Somehow I think they were trying to cover up the fact that it would have been, because it would have been too easy. If he would have just signed the papers, and then they would have been like, oh, and then he died. Like, it's, so they were trying not to make it so easy to track. So then the cops leave, and Mr. Reed comes out, and they talk about, like, their plans on how they're going to get away with this. First, they're gonna, Mr. Reed's like, I love you, and I want to be with you, and she's like, okay, well, first we're gonna not see each other for a couple weeks, and then I'll act like I need some insurance, and you'll come over and help me, and then we'll slowly blossom a romance, and then, in 6 months we'll be engaged, and then 6 months from then or whatever we'll be married, and all this stuff, and, so they're all working that out, and then it's interrupted by a knock at the door, and in comes James Reed's boss, Mr. Jasper, the one that Gloria does not like, and he comes in, and he's like, hey, I wanted to see if Gloria was okay. And at first, like, he was like, oh yeah, she's fine. But then Mr. Reed was like, wait, how did you know? Is it in the papers already? Because it just happened like a couple hours ago. And he's like, oh no, I ran into the cops or whatever and spoke with them, and they told me what happened. You find out that Mr. Jasper is used to, not really, I don't know if he was with Gloria, but he was obsessed with her before she married Mr. Fielding.
You see, James, Gloria and I used to be friends. Very close friends. But it didn't last very long because I made the mistake of introducing her to Sebastian. And the next thing I knew, she was the fourth Mrs. Fielding.
And he even set up, like, he bought a condo across the street on the 15th floor and put up a camera and watches and takes pictures of her and things like that. And he's very open about admitting it. And Gloria's like, oh, he's so horrible, get him out of here, I can't stand him and stuff. And he's kind of like, but I happened to see, I had my camera out tonight, and so he happened to see what happened and what Mr. Reed did to Mr. Fielding. And he's got it all on camera, and he went and he already got it developed. Now they're like, crap, he was onto them, which really, if you think about it, so many windows and things out there, like, they were across the street from many windows. If anyone could have seen it, like, it wasn't like he literally came up behind Mr. Fielding and picked him up, and didn't, like, you could see he picked him up, so Mr. Jasper wants to share Gloria, and his facial expressions are great, like how he does the stuff. They're just like, what do you want? He's like, Gloria, like right away.
I want to share
Share what?
Gloria.
He's sick. He's always been sick.
Because he admits he's obsessed with her, and she thinks he's disgusting. And so basically he wants to share Gloria. And his rules for it is he wants Gloria from dusk until dawn, and then he can have her all the other times. And I'm like, that's weird. So basically he wants her all night, and then he can have her all day. Mr. Reed's like, what? And Gloria's like, we should just do it. He's going to tell if we don't. And so it cuts to, they're still in the penthouse. Well, Mr. Reed is, and he's having a lot of bad thoughts about what he did, and he's drinking all the time, and he's depressed, and they're still, you find out it's been cut to about 3 months later, and they're still doing the deal with Mr. Jasper. And she comes back early in the morning, and she's been roughed up, and her hair, she's got her hair all teased and everything. She's like not super put together like she used to be. And she looks like she got hit in the face. It's kind of dark, but you can't really tell. And she basically said that it's just been horrible being with Mr. Jasper, and that he had her tonight go over to a place and get these dirty guys or whatever to like watch them have sex and all this stuff, and just all these things that, sounds really bad. And Mr. Reed's like, or James is like, we can't keep doing this. And she's like, it's not probably going to be too much longer and everything. And he's like, there's got to be something I can do. And she's like, no, there's nothing you can do. And so he's just feeling really, really guilty. And so a little bit of time later passes, and she's looking for James, and he's back in his houseboat, and he's laying there delirious, and she finds out that he's taken a bottle of pills. And she's asking him, she's like, what did you do? What did you take? And he's like, I took 48 pills of Namberol. And actually, let me look that up real quick. I meant to look that up. He says he took 48 pills of Namberol, and he wrote a confession note for her to relieve her of any responsibility, because he couldn't stand Mr. Jasper treating him that way, and that was the only way to get her free. And let's see, Nembutal is basically pentobarbital. So yeah, that's some pretty strong stuff. It is one of the drugs used in lethal injection to induce unconsciousness. So yeah, he took 48. He was pretty far in there. So he dies. And she's like, oh my gosh. And then as soon as he dies, she's like, that's nice. Thank you, sweet, dumb darling. She takes the confession letter and she burns it. And with his lighter. And I'm not sure I don't think she burns the boat down, but it kind of seems like, I guess not. But I thought maybe she was going to, but I don't think so. So he wrote a confession, takes pills, kills himself. She gets rid of that evidence. So that's why I'm thinking maybe she did burn the boat down, because why would you just burn it and leave it there? And then that would look kind of suspicious, but that's weird. In the letter it says Jonathan Fielding, but his name was Sebastian. Huh. Alright, maybe that was a mistake. After she, does that with him and burns it and stuff, and she goes out into the parking lot and gets in the car, and who's in the car but Mr. Jasper.
Did he?
He did indeed.
What did he use?
48 Nembutals.
How tight? Was there a confession note?
Yes, a long and incriminating one. I burned it, of course.
Now nobody will ever know that Sebastian was murdered.
Thanks to your brilliant planning.
And your brilliant acting.
And there's the twist. Mr. Jasper and Gloria have been a couple all along. They con James into taking the responsibility for Mr. Fielding's death. Now, that is a long con. I will give him that, because they were kind of already pre-doing it before Mr. Reed even came along. Because if you think about it, they were probably a couple for a while. She was either already, well, she was probably not married to Mr. Fielding yet. So they met. He admits to being obsessed with her. They con up this plan of this guy that he won't leave him alone, but he's also partners with Mr. Fielding. So I'm going to assume Mr. Jasper was friends with Mr. Fielding. He was with Gloria. They decided they wanted some money. He had, Mr. Fielding had a bunch of it. So they were like, hey, why don't you marry him? And then we will concoct a scheme about how we hate each other. And then I will get a guy that is working for me, Mr. Reed, to come do this whole insurance thing. We'll hide out for a few months. Technically, he wasn't doing anything to her from the dusk till dawn. They were probably just being together, every night. She never had to be with Mr. Reed that much, And then they just waited 3+ months, plus whatever it took to marry the guy, and then took him for all the money. So now James they got rid of the evidence for that, so he looks like he just killed himself, and then there's no one to tie it to the murder and just make it look like an accident, because the cops didn't know Mr. Reed was there to begin with. So really it just looks like Mr. Fielding fell over the thing, fell over the railing. So Mr. Jasper and Gloria are free to be a couple. I don't know what they're going to do next, but that was basically the twist. So I thought it was kind of interesting. I did remember that kind of coming up a little during the thing, but yeah, it was a pretty good one, because it had a good little twist at the end there, and the whole time they were doing this really long, probably year-long con to get all this money. Not sure how much, but I mean, the guy did pay like $3 million for his penthouse, so I would imagine they had quite a bit. That's the end of the episode, but they do cut to the birds, and they're saying like, hello, Jim, and help me, Gloria, and like they're repeating some of the stuff they heard, but no one knows. And I'm like, wait a minute, this has been 3 months. Who's taking care of these birds? They're still in that penthouse. I guess Mr. Reed was, like, this whole time. Why would you even care? Like, why wouldn't you just sell the bird? Like, who cares? They're really pricey, expensive birds that you gotta take good care of. So I'm like, who's taking care of all these birds? So they're still around for some reason. I don't know who's gonna take them now if they're just stuck in the penthouse. But yeah, so then it cuts to the crypt keeper. It's kind of weird. He's hanging himself, which is just weird, because first of all, he's undead, and it's just an uncomfortable thing. And so he's climbing up on a ladder, and he's putting the little rope around his neck, and the poetry here is great. I mean, he looks like he's just doing that, like no one, he's putting it around his neck, and he kicks the seat out from underneath him. He's just hanging there, and he's like, so this is suicide. And then he goes, somehow I thought it'd have more punch. Crypt keeper, you're so punny. So the best crypt keeper pun is,
if your ladies' evenings are all booked up, do what I do. Dropper.
Get it? Dropper, because fell over the balcony. Yep, that was fun. But yeah, that's the end of the episode. Season 2, episode 7, The Sacrifice. There's no trivia for this one either. A couple of them I haven't really found much stuff on IMDb. I mean, I'm sure there's other stuff around, but I'm just kind of checking on that. If you know anything, send me an email, goodeveningpod@gmail.com. But that's the episode. The next episode will be Season 2, Episode 8, For Crying Out Loud. So yeah, this is the Good Evening Kitties podcast. If you'll like, rate, review, subscribe, share with people, anything like that. Again, you can email me at goodeveningpod@gmail.com. And again, thanks for listening.
I just had quite a scare. I actually thought my heart was beating.